So if I tell you that the future is going to be infinitely better than the past, like so bright, so revolutionary that it will basically make our current history look like a flickering candle next to a supernova,
Right.
the absolute last thing I should do is use the past as my benchmark.
Yeah, that would be totally counterproductive.
Right. Yet, in one of the most, famous and mind-bending philosophical texts of the 20th century, that is exactly the paradox we're presented with right out of the gate.
It's a massive contradiction. And, it's not a mistake. It is a very deliberate provocation that's meant to force us to completely rethink the mechanics of reality.
Welcome to the deep dive, everyone. Today, we are diving into a classic Chassidic discourse, a text known as a mamar, which was delivered in 1952 on the final day of the Passover holiday. And our mission today, the whole goal of this deep dive, is to entirely dismantle and then rebuild your understanding of what a miracle actually is,
Yeah.
what nature is, and the hidden, almost staggering power of that mundane daily grind that you go through every single day.
And to really appreciate what this text is doing, we have to understand what a mamar actually is, because this isn't a sermon.
Right, it's not just nice ideas.
Exactly. It's not a collection of nice, inspirational thoughts to, get you through your work week. In this mystical tradition, a discourse like this is treated as a rigorous exposition of cosmic mechanics. It's basically ontological physics.
Wow, ontological physics. I like that.
Yeah, the author is taking a scalpel to the underlying structure of existence, and he's using ancient texts as the code base.
And the specific code being analyzed here is a single ancient verse from the biblical book of Micah. It's chapter 7, verse 15. And the verse reads, "As in the days of your exodus from the land of Egypt, I will show him wonders."
Which, on the surface, just sounds poetic, right? It's a prophet promising that God will do amazing things in the future, just like he did in the past.
Right. But if you look at the overarching theology of this whole tradition, it creates an immediate, glaring problem. Because according to all the classical prophetic traditions, the future redemption, this, ultimate utopian era of universal peace, spiritual clarity, the perfection of the physical world, it's supposed to be infinitely greater than the exodus from Egypt.
Oh, absolutely.
It's supposed to be an event so overwhelmingly massive that the ancient sages actually debate whether humanity will even bother to mention the exodus anymore. Like, it would be entirely eclipsed.
Exactly. The scale is completely incomparable. Because, the Exodus from Egypt was a localized event. It was for one nation dealing with one specific empire.
Right.
But the future redemption is described as a fundamental, permanent shift in the fabric of the entire universe. It affects every living creature and the very nature of matter itself.
Okay, so let's unpack this. If the future is supposed to completely eclipse the past, why does Micah use Egypt as the benchmark? Why say, I'm going to show you wonders that are like the days you left Egypt? It just feels like a downgrade. It's like telling an astronaut who is literally about to colonize Mars, wow, this is going to be just like the time you learned to ride a tricycle.
Yeah, it totally diminishes the scope of the promise. But what's fascinating here is that the author of this 1952 discourse doesn't just stop at that overarching thematic paradox. In this tradition of study, every single letter, every pluralization, every pronoun is considered precise and deliberate.
There's no filler text.
None. There is absolutely no filler. And the author zeroes in on two very strange grammatical anomalies in this one specific verse.
Yeah, I noticed this when I was looking through the source material, and it really tripped me up. So the first anomaly is the pluralization. The verse says, as in the days of your exodus, days, plural. But leaving Egypt, the actual historical event of crossing the border from slavery into freedom, that happened on a single day.
Right.
And the text makes a point of highlighting that whenever the biblical text commands the remembrance of the Exodus elsewhere, it almost always specifies the day you came out. Singular.
Exactly. It was a singular historical pivot point. So why does Micah suddenly switch to the plural? That's the first anomaly. And the second is this very jarring shift in perspective.
The pronouns.
Yes.
Because the verse starts in the second person, as in the days of your exodus, speaking directly to the audience, the people listening. But then it immediately shifts to the third person, I will show him wonders.
Right.
Not I will show you wonders. It's as if the speaker turns away from the crowd mid-sentence and just points to a single specific individual in the corner of the room.
Exactly. So who is the him? Why the sudden shift? To answer these questions, the text basically tells us we have to go all the way back to the drawing board. We cannot resolve these grammatical quirks without completely rethinking the entire hierarchy of miracles.
Okay.
We have to explore the shocking future destiny of the physical human body, and we have to figure out how our darkest, most frustrating moments fit into this massive cosmic architecture.
Which brings us to the nature of miracles themselves. Because usually, we just think a miracle is a miracle, right? Something impossible happens, the laws of physics take a coffee break, and we call it a day.
Yeah, that's the standard definition.
But this discourse argues that there is a strict hierarchy, and it breaks miracles down into two main categories. You have miracles that are above nature and miracles that are clothed in nature.
Right, so let's start with that first category, miracles above nature. The classic examples provided are the splitting of the Red Sea or, water turning into blood during the plagues of Egypt. But the text isn't just giving us a history lesson here. It's actually explaining the spiritual physics of what is happening during these events.
It describes this infinite, limitless light, an energy that is completely beyond the boundaries of our physical world, just shining down into our reality. And because this energy is truly infinite, it absolutely shatters the finite laws of nature.
Nature simply cannot contain it. Think about the physical properties of water. Fluid dynamics dictate that water must flow downwards, right? It finds its level, it conforms to the shape of its container. That is the finite law governing that specific substance.
Yeah.
But when this specific type of infinite energy hits it, that finite law is completely overridden. The water stands up like a solid brick wall. The nature of the world is temporarily broken.
I was trying to map this onto something we interact with daily, and it really feels like software programming to me. A miracle above nature, like the splitting of the sea, is like a total system crash and a hard reboot.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's a kernel panic.
Yeah.
The operating system of the universe literally cannot handle the massive influx of data from this infinite light, so the code just snaps. The physics engine blue screens.
That's a highly accurate way to visualize it. The container breaks, the system is entirely disrupted.
But then you have the second category, right? A miracle closed in nature. And the text uses the historical events of Purim or Chanukah as examples here. In these scenarios, there are no ocean splitting.
Right. There's no fire falling from the sky, no suspension of gravity.
In a miracle closed in nature, the infinite light still permeates the world, perhaps even more powerfully. But the world's boundaries do not break. The natural world actually accommodates the miracle perfectly.
Wow.
If you look at the story of Purim, it takes place over several years. It involves political maneuvering, insomnia, shifting alliances, royal decrees. It all happens completely within the logical framework of cause and effect.
So going back to the software analogy, this is like having a master coder who elegantly rewrites the algorithm from within the system itself.
Yes.
They introduce a patch so flawlessly and they execute the code so perfectly that the program does something mathematically astounding, but it never crashes. The user operating the software just thinks, wow, this app is running incredibly smoothly today. Everything is just clicking into place.
And that leads to a fascinating subcategory that the text introduces. It speaks of miracles so deeply, flawlessly clothed in nature that they are completely invisible to the person experiencing them. The ultimate hidden miracle. The text quotes a verse from Psalms, "To him who alone does great wonders." And the interpretation here is just staggering. It means there are wonders happening where God alone knows a miracle just occurred.
The person living through it is completely oblivious. You might hit a string of green lights on the way to a crucial meeting, or you randomly decide to take a different route home and you avoid a massive pileup.
Right.
Or maybe a passing comment you make offhandedly ends up securing you a job 5 years later. You just chalk it up to a lucky coincidence or serendipity or just the normal, boring flow of life.
But the text is arguing that these invisible hypernatural events actually stem from a higher level of the divine than the flashy, physics-breaking miracles.
Yes, and this is the first major paradigm shift we have to internalize here. We are so conditioned to think that the flashy, rule-breaking miracles are the best ones.
Oh, totally. If you ask anyone to define a miracle, they want the system crash. They want the undeniable proof of the burning bush or the splitting sea.
Exactly. But the text states that miracles clothed in nature originate from a structurally higher spiritual source.
Which feels completely counterintuitive. If I want to see the ultimate power of the universe, I expect to see it completely dominate and destroy the petty laws of physics. Why is bending the rules considered higher than breaking them?
Well, if we connect this to the deeper mechanics of Kabbalistic thought, It actually makes perfect logical sense. Think about the nature of the infinite. The infinite is, by definition, boundless. It has no edges, no limits, no shape.
Right.
So it is relatively easy for a boundless force to simply obliterate a boundary. If you pour the entire Pacific Ocean onto a tiny porcelain teacup, the teacup will be instantly crushed. That is a miracle above nature. The finite container is destroyed with the infinite input.
Right, the system crashes.
But imagine a scenario where you pour the entire infinite mass of the Pacific Ocean into that exact same tiny porcelain teacup. And the teacup doesn't break.
Wait, what?
It remains a fragile, finite, 3-inch tall cup, yet it somehow manages to hold the infinite raging depths of the ocean within it.
I mean, that would require a manipulation of reality that I can't even fathom.
Exactly. Managing to fit the infinite into the finite without breaking the finite container requires a supreme, unparalleled mastery. It requires a source of energy that isn't just beyond limits, it is the absolute master of both the limitless and the limited simultaneously.
Okay, I see.
To orchestrate a sequence of completely natural, highly probable events so perfectly that they deliver an impossible salvation, all without violating a single law of physics, thermodynamics, or human free will. That shows a level of architectural control far superior to just suspending the rules.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, and this is where I need to push back a bit, because the text takes this concept to an extreme conclusion. If a miracle that perfectly mimics nature comes from a higher place than a miracle that breaks nature, what about nature itself? What about the actual, boring, predictable laws of physics?
This is where the discourse drops its most profound philosophical argument. It makes the claim that the ultimate proof of infinite, limitless power isn't a miracle of any kind. It is the relentless, unchanging consistency of everyday nature.
I mean, think about how wild that claim is. If you, listening right now, are searching for evidence of a higher power, you are likely looking for an exception to the rule. You're looking for a glitch in the matrix.
Always.
A spontaneous healing, a prophetic dream, something that defies rational explanation. But this text is arguing that looking at the sun rising in the east every single morning without fail, without the battery ever dying or needing a recharge for billions of years, that relentless, boring consistency is a far greater proof of infinite power than the ocean splitting in half.
And to understand the mechanics of why this is true, we have to dive into the specific Kabbalistic cosmology the text references. It maps out different types of divine light or, energy frequencies that sustain the universe.
Let's get into the physics of this.
Okay, so when a miracle breaks nature, the text explains that the energy is coming from a level called the surrounding light, or Sodav Kol Alman in Hebrew. This is a transcendent light that encompasses all reality but remains detached from it. It absolutely rejects limits.
Okay.
Because it doesn't fit inside the logic of the world, when a localized beam of this light shines down, it overpowers the world. It's like bringing a massive industrial electromagnet next to a delicate compass. The compass needle spins wildly out of control because the local magnetic field is totally overwhelmed.
So the surrounding light is responsible for the Red Sea splitting. It's the electromagnet.
Yes, but the enduring consistency of nature, the fact that gravity pulls at exactly 9.8 meters per second squared today, just as it did a million years ago, or the fact that an acorn always, without exception, grows into an oak tree and never a pine tree, that consistency does not come from the surrounding light. It comes from a completely different mechanism.
Huh.
The text identifies this source as the kavav.
The kavav, the singular line or ray of light.
Exactly. And to understand the kav, we have to look at the very genesis of reality. The kav is a ray of light that originates from before the primordial contraction, what Kabbalah calls the Tzimtzum.
Okay, we need to pause here and thoroughly explain the concept of Tzimtzum for you listening, because it is the absolute bedrock of this entire philosophy. Let's look at the ontological problem that Tzimtzum solves. Before there was a physical universe, before time or space existed, there was only the infinite.
Right.
But if an infinite, boundless presence fills all conceptual space, there is literally no room for anything else to exist. You cannot have a finite physical universe. You can't have a table, a planet, or a human being if the space is already entirely saturated by boundless, infinite energy.
It's a paradox of omnipresence.
Yeah.
If the infinite is everywhere, the finite cannot be anywhere. It would be instantly nullified. It's like a single drop of water trying to maintain its individual boundaries while submerged in the ocean. It just dissolves.
So conceptually, the infinite had to conceal itself. It had to create a void, a conceptual empty space where its overwhelming, limitless presence was masked. That deliberate concealment, that pulling back, is the tzimtzum.
Yes.
It's a cosmic dimming of the lights to allow for the possibility of a finite bounded reality to emerge. Our entire universe exists within that conceptual void.
But that creates a secondary problem. If the infinite entirely withdraws, the universe has no life force. It's an empty, dead vacuum. It cannot exist.
Right. So into that void, a single, highly measured, incredibly focused ray of light is beamed. That is the kav.
Now, here is the secret of the kav and why it is so crucial to understanding the power of nature. Because the kav originates from before the contraction, from the absolute pre-Tzimtzum infinity where the concept of limits did not even exist. It inherently possesses the absolute, limitless power of eternity. It is an infinite power source.
Okay.
But because it is being through the contraction, it has been trained.
Yeah.
It has the ability to act with absolute precision, measurement, and limitation.
So it's essentially a hybrid. It has the DNA of the absolute limitless and the DNA of the strictly limited.
Precisely. The kav has the unique ability to harmonize two total opposites, the infinite, which is boundless, and the finite, which is measurable and strict.
Yeah.
When we look at the natural world, we see the finite. A tree only lives for so many years, a rock has a specific mass, the human body gets tired.
Right.
But when we look at the consistency of nature, the fact that the intricate, mathematically perfect laws governing that tree and that rock never pause, never tire, never take a day off across millennia, we are looking directly at the infinite.
The infinite is hiding in the endless repetition of the finite.
Yes. The fact that the universe doesn't just unravel into chaotic, randomized static from 1 millisecond to the next requires an infinite eternal power source to constantly synthesize and sustain it.
Wow.
The text points out that a miracle, by definition, is a temporary glitch. The Red Sea split, and then a few hours later it crashed back down and went back to being a normal sea. The infinite showed up, made a loud noise, and then left. But nature stays.
Imagine you are stuck in rush hour traffic on your way to work. Your instinct is that this is a flaw in your day. It's mundane, it's boring, it's exactly what happened yesterday. You might be sitting there wishing for a miracle to happen, wishing you'd win the lottery so you never have to sit in this traffic again.
Yeah, you want out.
You want a sudden disruption. We are so conditioned to constantly look for the aha breakthrough moments as the only valid signs of progress or divine intervention.
We constantly crave the miracles above nature. We want the sudden inspiration that writes the novel in a weekend, the crash diet that changes us overnight.
But if we apply the mechanics of the Kavav, the text is suggesting that the quiet, unyielding consistency in your life, the things that just keep going, are powered by the deepest wellspring of cosmic energy.
Absolutely.
The fact that you sit in that traffic, get to work, do the boring tasks, feed your family, pay your bills, chop the wood, carry the water, and do it again the next day, that relentless consistency isn't just mundane survival. It is a direct reflection of the Kavav. By maintaining consistency within a limited framework, you are tapping into an eternal power source that is structurally higher than a sudden, fleeting moment of profound enlightenment.
Which perfectly connects to how this discourse views human psychology and spirituality. The universe mirrors the human mind. The difference between these two types of miracles, the flashy ones that break nature and the subtle ones that work within it, perfectly maps onto how we as human beings approach our own egos and our spiritual growth.
Okay.
The text introduces two distinct types of spiritual submission, or what it calls nullification, bittul in Hebrew.
This part is where the philosophy becomes incredibly practical. So what are the two types of nullification?
The first is called Yechuda Ilah, which translates roughly to higher unity. This is an intellectual, contemplative state. Imagine you are meditating on a mountaintop, or you are deeply studying the vastness of the cosmos, pondering the intricacies of quantum mechanics, or reading a profound piece of philosophy.
Sounds amazing.
Right. In that moment of intense focus, you are struck by a realization of your own utter insignificance in the face of the infinite.
You realize, as the text says, all is considered as nothing before him. You feel like a tiny speck of dust in the grand, sweeping scheme of reality.
Exactly. It's a beautiful, transcendent, floating feeling. Your ego is subdued by the sheer crushing weight of intellectual understanding. You feel enlightened.
But then there's the second type, Kabbalat Ol, which translates to acceptance of the yoke.
This is a completely different mechanism.
Oh.
This is acting like an absolute, unconditional servant. It has absolutely nothing to do with your understanding, your feelings, or your profound philosophical meditations. In a state of Kabbalat Ol, you might completely misunderstand a situation. You might feel totally uninspired, exhausted, and cynical. You might even internally, logically disagree with what you know is the right thing to do. But you submit your will and you just do it anyway. You put on the yoke like a heavy wooden beam on an ox plowing a field, and you pull.
I have to play the skeptic here because this goes against almost all modern advice on wellness, self-actualization, and mindfulness. Isn't profound understanding, that state of yuchuda ilah, inherently better than blind, gritty obedience?
That's what we usually think, yeah.
If I understand why I'm doing something and I feel inspired to do it, isn't that a higher state of being than just gritting my teeth and doing it purely out of duty?
That is the logical assumption, and is how most of us operate. We think intellectual enlightenment is the peak. But let's look at an analogy to see why the text argues otherwise. Think about the difference between studying the theory of music versus actually playing a complex piece of music. Let's say mastering jazz.
Okay, let's unpack that.
When you study music theory, you can sit in a quiet room and understand the brilliant mathematics behind chord progressions, harmonies, and time signatures. You can listen to John Coltrane and conceptually grasp the genius of what he's doing. You are in a state of intellectual clarity. Your mind is perfectly aligned with the beauty of the music. This is like yuchuda ilah.
Right, but I haven't actually touched an instrument.
Exactly. Now, to actually play that music, you have to subject your physical body to a brutal, repetitive discipline. You have to practice scales until your fingers literally bleed and form calluses. You have to sit there for hours repeating the same boring progression when you are tired, frustrated, and uninspired.
Right.
In those moments of practice, you don't feel enlightened. You don't feel the transcendent beauty of the music. You just feel the heavy, frustrating constraints of the rules. You are accepting the yoke.
And here is the second major reveal of the text. It argues that the acceptance of the yoke, that gritty, miserable repetition of the scales, is actually the truer, deeper form of surrender.
It is. And the reason why exposes a massive blind spot in how we view enlightenment.
Mm.
When you have that profound intellectual realization, when you are meditating on the mountaintop, feeling your own insignificance, it is still entirely about you. Yes. It is your brilliant mind comprehending the vastness. It is your refined feelings of awe. Your ego hasn't actually disappeared. It has simply been repurposed into a more sophisticated spiritual shape. The sentence, "I am realizing my own nothingness," still begins with I.
Wow. I am basically just enjoying the aesthetic of being humble.
Perfectly said. The I is still the center of the experience. But when you act purely as a servant, when you accept the yoke and grind through the scales, or when you force yourself to do the right thing, even when every fiber of your intellectual and emotional being is screaming in protest, you completely bypass your own existence.
Because it's not about how I feel.
Right. You aren't doing it because you feel good about it. You aren't doing it because you understand it. You are doing it simply because it is the will of the master. Your ego isn't repurposed. It is completely overridden by sheer unadulterated action.
And the text makes this incredible, perfect map between the physics of the miracles and the psychology of the human being. Intellectual enlightenment, that higher unity, is exactly like the nature-breaking miracle. It is a flash of infinite light that temporarily overwhelms your system. You feel so inspired that your natural selfish tendencies are just suspended. The Red Sea of your ego splits.
But then, inevitably, the inspiration fades. The retreat ends, you go back to normal life, and the sea crashes back down. You are back to being your flawed self.
Right. But accepting the yoke is exactly like the miracle clothed in nature. You remain yourself. Your nature doesn't break. You still feel selfish. You still feel tired. You still want to quit. Your finite boundaries are completely intact.
Yeah.
But your actions align perfectly with the infinite will anyway. You manage to fit the infinite demands into the tight, restrictive, frustrating container of your daily life. You are the teacup holding the ocean.
This raised an incredibly important question for me when I was analyzing the source material. If the gritty, physical action of accepting the yoke is ultimately higher than the lofty, floating state of intellectual enlightenment, what does that say about the physical body that performs these actions?
Yeah, so what does this all mean? This leads us directly to one of the most wild, sci-fi-esque predictions in the entire discourse. It's a complete cosmic flip of everything we assume about spirituality. The text states that in the future redemption, the soul will be nourished by the body.
Let's really analyze the weight of that statement, because currently, in our present reality, how do we fundamentally view the relationship between the body and the soul?
Across almost all cultures and philosophies, the body is seen as the problem. It is this heavy, coarse, spiritually dense meat sack that constantly demands food, sleep, comfort, and immediate gratification. It's the animal. And the soul is viewed as the pure, ethereal, enlightened spark trapped inside it. The soul's job is to constantly manage the body, discipline it, restrict its appetites, and provide it with spiritual direction. The body completely relies on the soul for its life force.
That is the current hierarchy. The software runs the hardware, and the hardware is considered inferior. But the text argues that because the physical body's ultimate spiritual work is built entirely on that gritty the yoke, acceptance of the yoke, pushing through its own physical heaviness, fighting its own lethargy to do the right thing when it doesn't want to, it actually taps into an infinite power source that is structurally far higher than anything the intellectual, ethereal soul can reach on its own.
The soul can meditate. The soul can experience that beautiful higher unity. But only the physical body can drag itself out of bed at 5 a.m. to help a neighbor. Only the physical body can take a physical dollar out of its physical pocket and give it to charity when it's actively worried about paying rent.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The soul cannot do a physical act. And therefore, the body's capacity for blind, stubborn action connects it directly to the essence of the Kav, that pre-Zimsum realm of the infinite where God is alone, entirely beyond comprehension.
Wow.
And because of this structural advantage, the text makes a staggering extrapolation. In the future utopian era, when the true spiritual physics of the universe are finally unveiled, the hierarchy will invert.
But wait, logistically, how is that even possible? The body degrades, it gets tired, it requires calories. How can mortal, decaying hardware eventually sustain immortal software?
The text claims that the physical body, once fully refined, won't need physical food in the way we understand it. Because its root is in the highest levels of the infinite Kav, it will be nourished directly by divinity.
Unbelievable.
The coarseness we associate with the body is just a temporary symptom of our current unrefined era. In the future, the body will reveal its true source, and because that source is higher than the soul's, the body will become superior to the soul. The soul will actually look to the physical body for its spiritual sustenance.
Just think about how this completely validates the human experience for you listening right now. We are so often sold the idea that the goal of spirituality is to escape our bodies. We want to close our eyes, ignore our physical aches and pains, ignore the mess in the kitchen, ignore the stress of our jobs, and just be pure floating minds. We think true spirituality is out there, in some ethereal realm.
We want to be angels. We view our physical needs as annoying distractions from our true spiritual purpose.
Right. But this text says the exact opposite. The physical hardware is ultimately holier than the software. The ultimate goal of the universe isn't for you to shed your physical existence and float away to heaven. The goal is to elevate the physical world so thoroughly that heaven is forced to come down into your kitchen. Your body, with all its annoying demands, its fatigue, and its friction, is actually the ultimate cosmic battery.
But that battery has to be charged. And more importantly, it has to be refined. If the body is this powerful, why is it currently so stubborn and selfish? Which brings us to a remarkably practical, albeit tough, metaphor the text provides for how we actually trigger this futuristic elevation of the physical world.
This brings up a major practical problem. How do we do the work in the dark? Because right now, the body certainly doesn't feel holier than the soul.
The discourse references another prophecy regarding the future, stating, "He will guide them in shoes." To explain what this means, it compares our spiritual work in this physical world to the ancient, grueling process of tanning leather.
I love this metaphor. It is so visceral and grounded. Think about a piece of raw animal hide. When it first comes off the animal, it is stiff, it's hard, it smells terrible, and it is completely, fundamentally useless for making clothing. You cannot just wrap a stiff, dried, rigid piece of rawhide around your foot and expect to walk anywhere. It will cut you.
It actively resists bending. It resists being formed or utilized for anything productive.
Exactly. So to make a shoe something that specifically allows a human being to walk forward, to traverse the harsh ground without injuring their foot, you have to forcefully process that leather. You have to pound it with mallets. You have to soak it in harsh chemicals and tannins. You have to scrape it, stretch it, and violently treat it to break down the rigid proteins and soften it up. It is an exhausting, labor-intensive process to take something stubborn and make it flexible.
The text connects this directly to human nature. In Kabbalah, we all possess what is called an animal soul. These are our primal, selfish, survival-based instincts. It's the part of us that just wants to consume, dominate, protect itself, and rest. And that animal soul is exactly like the stiff rawhide. It is entirely rigid in its desires.
It's the voice in your head that says, I want what I want it now, and I don't care who I have to step on to get it.
Precisely. And our spiritual work, especially during periods of history referred to as exile, which the text identifies as times of deep darkness, struggle, and lack of divine clarity, is the brutal process of tanning that leather. The discourse refers to our current modern era as the heels of the Messiah.
The heels.
Yeah, the heel is the lowest, thickest, most calloused part of the body. It feels the least amount of sensation. In this era, we don't have open miracles. We don't have seas splitting. We don't have prophets speaking to us directly. We just have the calloused, numb, daily grind.
We have to fight our own stubborn nature without any flashy inspiration to help us. We have to soften ourselves.
And here's a fascinating detail the text brings in to underscore this point, and it relies on the concept of gematria.
I've always struggled with gematria. It often sounds like arbitrary numerology to people unfamiliar with it. I mean, why should the fact that two words share a mathematical value mean anything real in the physical world?
It requires a shift in how we view language. In Kabbalistic philosophy, Hebrew letters are not arbitrary symbols assigned by human consensus the way English letters are. They are considered the acoustic signatures of divine energy. They are the source code of reality.
Okay.
Think of it like the periodic table of elements. Hydrogen has an atomic weight of 1, helium is 2. If you find two seemingly different substances that share the exact same atomic structure and weight, they share fundamental properties. They're structurally linked. The same is true for Hebrew words. The numerical value is the atomic weight of the concept.
Okay, that makes sense. So what is the equation the text points out here?
The text points out that the specific Hebrew name for God that represents strict judgment, limitation, and the concealment of the divine Elohim has the exact same numerical value, 86, as the Hebrew word for nature hateva.
Okay, let me make sure I'm fully grasping the implications of this. Nature hateva is literally the exact same structural substance as strict, unyielding judgment Elohim. Nature is the mask. It's the system that deliberately hides the infinite light and makes the world look mundane, harsh, unforgiving, and completely devoid of miracles.
Precisely. They are mathematically and spiritually identical. And so when we battle our own stubborn, selfish nature, when we force ourselves to be kind, when our instinct is to be cruel, when we choose strict discipline over lazy apathy, when we accept the yoke, we aren't just engaging in a cute personal self-improvement project.
Wow.
We are literally hacking the source code. We are refining the cosmic concept of Elohim in the universe. We are taking the harsh, unyielding mask of nature and softening it from the inside out. We are tanning the leather of reality.
So every single time you, the listener, do the right thing when it is incredibly hard, every time you force yourself out of a selfish rut in this dark, confusing, uninspired modern world, you are hammering the leather. You are taking the stiff hide of the universe and making it flexible enough to hold the infinite light without breaking. You are literally preparing the physical world to take a step forward into that utopian future.
Which finally brings us full circle. Now that we understand the absolute supremacy of nature, the hidden infinite power of the physical body, and the cosmic necessity of our daily struggles in the dark, we can finally solve the opening mysteries of the biblical verse.
Right. Let's go back to Micah chapter 7, verse 15. As in the days of your exodus from the land of Egypt, I will show him wonders. We had two grammatical anomalies. Why the plural days for a one-day event? And why the jarring shift from your exodus to I will show him?
Let's tackle the plural days first. The text explains that the Exodus wasn't just a one-off, isolated historical event. It was a comprehensive process that spanned multiple stages. It included day 1, the actual physical leaving of the borders of Egypt, and it culminated on day 7, which was the splitting of the Red Sea.
The ultimate miracle above nature.
Exactly. But the text views this entire past miracle, this entire 7-day spectrum, as just the opening of a pipe, a cosmic conduit, or tzinor in Hebrew, for all of human history. The Exodus wasn't the culmination of God's plan. It was merely the planting of the seed. The future redemption will mirror both of these events, but on a massive, permanent cosmic scale.
So Micah uses the plural days because he is speaking to the entire structural pipeline. He's saying, remember that entire spectrum of miracles from the Exodus, from the first day of physical freedom to the 7th day of suspended physics. That whole package was just the pilot episode. The pipeline is open.
Exactly. And what flows through that pipeline? The ability for the infinite to interact with the finite. And this leads directly to the second anomaly. Why say, I will show him? Who is the individual being pointed out? The text reveals that the him refers specifically to Moses.
Moses, the one who actually led them out of Egypt.
Yes. Moses was the one who initiated the Exodus. He was the one who, through his absolute, unparalleled self-nullification, opened this cosmic pipe in the first place. Moses was the master of bridging the infinite and the finite. And the future vision that Mike is describing is a reality where the infinite light will be revealed directly within the natural world without breaking it. Nature itself will become a perfectly transparent vessel for the divine. The teacup will finally hold the ocean without shattering.
And because this entire process was seeded, initiated, and architected by Moses during the Exodus, Micah is saying the future will be like the days of Egypt, but infinitely magnified. The future is the full, glorious blossoming of what Moses planted.
Yes, exactly.
But I have to ask, and I'm sure anyone listening is wondering this too, how on earth does this apply to us today? Moses lived thousands of years ago. He was a singular, towering, historical figure who spoke to God face to face. How does his opening a cosmic pipe back in antiquity help me deal with my stubborn animal soul, my traffic jams, and my daily grind today?
This is the text's final and perhaps most empowering psychological point. It explains that Moses isn't just a historical figure buried in the past. The soul of Moses is a universal fractal archetype. Every single person has a spark of Moses embedded deep within their own psyche.
We all have an inner Moses.
Yes, a piece of that exact same spiritual architecture exists within you, and to see the future wonders, to actually experience this seamless integration of the infinite into your mundane life, you must activate your inner Moses.
Okay, wait. If activating my inner Moses is the key to all of this, how exactly do I do that? And realizing this out loud, it has to mean synthesizing everything we just spent the last hour talking about. It means combining those two types of surrender, those two types of nullification we discussed earlier.
Precisely.
Yeah.
You cannot rely on just one. You need both mechanisms working in tandem.
You need the mind-bending intellectual contemplation, the yuchuda ila'a. You need to study, to read, to meditate, to expand your mind until you realize that everything is nothing before the infinite. You need to crack the rigidity of your worldview and realize your own ego is an illusion. But you absolutely cannot stop there, because if you stop there, you're just floating in the clouds, enjoying your own spiritual buzz. You're studying music theory, but never playing the instrument.
You haven't tanned the leather. You haven't changed the physical world.
Right. To activate that Moses spark, you also need the gritty boot camp style acceptance of the yoke, the Kabbalat ol. You have to take that profound, lofty intellectual realization and forcefully drag it down into your physical body, into your daily grind. You have to practice the scales, you have to do the chores, pay the bills, bite your tongue when you desperately want to lash out in anger, and do the hard, unglamorous work of softening the world around you.
The intellect opens the pipe, but the gritty, physical action is the pump that pulls the light down through it into reality. That is the synthesis of Moses. That is how the physical body, through sheer discipline, eventually becomes holier than the soul.
This has been an incredibly profound journey. We started with a highly technical grammar question about an ancient verse. Why say days instead of day? Why say him instead of you? And by unpacking those tiny, seemingly insignificant anomalies, we ended up discovering that the boring, relentless consistency of nature outside your window is secretly a more massive miracle than the Red Sea splitting.
We learned that the ultimate spiritual goal isn't to escape our physical existence, but to realize that our physical bodies, through the tough, repetitive discipline of doing the right thing, will one day completely outshine our ethereal souls.
We found out that fighting our daily bad habits isn't just a matter of self-help or personal optimization. It is the cosmic equivalent of tanning leather, hacking the source code of reality, and making the universe flexible enough to walk into a utopian future.
It completely reorients what it means to live a meaningful life. The mundane isn't a distraction from the holy, it is the ultimate necessary container for it.
Before we go, though, I know the text leaves us with one final, fascinating detail, a little visual nugget that wasn't the main focus of the discourse, but is something incredible to mull over as we wrap up.
Yes, there's a very brief but highly provocative thought mentioned toward the end of the text. We spent a lot of time talking about the Exodus from Egypt and how God split the sea. But the text notes a fascinating distinction. When the prophets describe the future redemption, they don't say God will split a sea again. They say God will split a river, specifically, striking it into 7 streams so people can walk across it in shoes.
Why the change in topography? I mean, why is splitting a river considered greater than splitting a sea?
The mystical tradition explains that a sea represents the hidden worlds. Think about the ocean. It is vast, teeming with life, massive ecosystems, and incredible power. But it is all completely submerged. It's hidden within the water. You look at the surface of the ocean and you essentially see a flat void. You see nothing of the life below.
The reality of the ocean is inherently concealed.
Exactly. But a river is completely different. A river represents a continuous, active, visible flow. It takes water from a high, hidden, pristine source, like a melting glacier on an unreachable mountain peak, and visibly, actively bridges the gap, carrying that water all the way down through the dirt and rock to the lowest plains. A river is the visible connection between the highest realms and the lowest physical reality.
So splitting the river means revealing the hidden flow of reality itself. It's not just exposing what's hidden in a static, localized ocean. It's revealing the active, dynamic lifeline that constantly connects the infinite source to our finite world.
Exactly. And so, the question I would leave everyone with is this. Consider the landscape of your own life right now. What is the river flowing through your daily experience? What is that continuous, perhaps seemingly mundane routine that connects your highest, most pristine ideals to your lowest, most frustrating daily tasks? That river, that daily flow, is waiting to be split open and navigated. It holds the potential for the ultimate future wonder.
What an image to leave on. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. We hope this conversation has given you a completely new, mechanical lens through which to view your life. Tomorrow morning, when you look out your window at the sun rising, just like it always does, or when you face that stubborn, frustrating habit you've been trying to break for years, we hope you look at that boring nature with completely new eyes. You are looking at the infinite. Keep tanning the leather. We'll see you next time.